Hello. I wanted to share some updates about the website and a few of the other posters that I've created recently. The last video I posted, I went over the website and basically I just wanted to show some updates. Ignore the crashing menu at the top here. But basically, I wanted to look at some of the other work that I've done and also talk a little bit about each one of these topics as an overview. If you haven't seen the last video, basically, Same Wavelength is my company brand, brainchild, topic of interest, whatever, where I am connecting the sciences and the arts through posters and objects and zines and things that explore different scientific topics. So, so far, I've had 8 different topics that I've looked at. In the last video, I explored the first 4, and now I really want to talk about all of them. And basically, this is a new element that I've added to the website. This is a menu where it has all the different topics. And if you click on each individual topic, it'll take you down to the part of the page where I discuss that individual wave. So, first things first. Um, each one of these topics is going to come with like a thorough, maybe somewhat thorough PDF explaining different little bits of knowledge about that individual topic. So for the poison dart frogs, basically I'm going to talk about their diet. I'm going to talk about their skin in terms of signaling to predators that they're toxic. And I'm also going to talk about other things in terms of their ecology, their conservation status, the difference between the different species, and the difference between a species and a morph of that species, et cetera, et cetera. So I explore some of that in the zine that I've already made, but it's very limited, the knowledge that I've already talked about. So I have a lot of work that I need to do on the back end to sort of do the science half of the art and science duo on these topics. So basically, I wanted to go through each one of these, sort of exploring the different topics and why I'm interested in them and what they have to do with science. So I'll do that quickly. So first things first, we have the poison dart frogs. I talked about how the reason I did these first is that the me fond memories I had as a child of the sciences had to do with like the zoo or wildlife as an entry point. A lot of kids, my generation, watched Zootopia. A lot of kids, had experiences going to the zoo or watching like Discovery Channel documentaries about wildlife. I think it's sort of a general thing where people like their connection with a lot of uh, exotic wildlife that's not native to wherever they live is either through the zoo or through media. And basically, the interest I had as a kid was that these frogs that I had stuffed animals of were bright and vibrant and interesting, and I wanted to learn more about them. And I've sort of been obsessed with them my whole life. And I actually went through my photos recently, and I've been designing frog posters for like years and years and years, like way longer than I thought I had been. So, feels very fitting that this is the first topic that I wanted to look at. And basically, um, I just think they're cool. As with most things, like if I choose to study them, it's because I have some sort of emotional connection to them. Science, despite what you may think, can be really emotional in terms of like why people pursue different things, why people study different things. So for me, this starting point was just that I had a nostalgic interest in these different species. So I talk a little bit in this zine, which was my initial foray into combining science and design into a little informational packet. By the way, in the future, when I have actual little pamphlets about different topics, I've decided to call them wave packets, which is a quantum physics joke. And I will explain that at some point in the future. But basically, little pamphlets about each different wave or topic that I'm exploring. In the previous video, I talked about how I'm calling each topic a wave instead of a drop in the streetwear brand vein. And watch the previous video, I guess. If you want more information about that, this is just about the specific topics. So, anyways, poison dart frogs, super interesting. I talk a little bit about how their poison comes from their diet. They eat poisonous bugs, therefore they become poisonous. They're not poisoned by their bugs. They become poisonous to predators. They can walk about during the day next to other predators. They won't get eaten because the second point is that they have different skin. Their skin is different colors, vibrant colors, which signals that I am dangerous, do not eat me. That leads to a super interesting thing in nature where you have dangerous species that look a certain way that are signaling don't eat me, and then other mimic species evolve to look just like them or similar enough, uh, where predators will say, I don't want to eat you either, even if I don't know that you're not poisonous because I think that you are. So there's a ton of really interesting work on that, and I will dive into that uh, when I write more about this. Again, I'm not an expert in any of the individual topics that I am writing about, but I am knowledgeable enough that I can cobble together something interesting as a starting point, and then it's sort of up to the uh, viewer to do more research. Always open to being wrong. I'm wrong a lot in my life generally. So if I write something wrong, it's really important that if someone catches it, let me know because then I'll update it. So that's super interesting. I also obviously will want to talk a bit about the conservation status of a lot of these different species. I did a very, 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 very tiny amount of conservation ecology right after I graduated from college, and it's a really important element of science that if we as humans are studying these things, and it's important to have a message about preservation or about how, certain purchasing of goods like leads to degradation of certain jungles or atmospheres or whatever, like that story is told. So that's also an element that I talk about and we'll talk about further. Next topic, big cats. Similarly, when I was a kid, I had a coffee table book that I got somewhere, like huge to me book of big cats, and it terrified me because they had big teeth and a lot of them were like in the water, and I was afraid of water, so that double extra scared me because I didn't want to drown, and then I thought about tigers in the water and swimming and all these other things. Um, but I was also really fascinated, and there were a lot of images also of like saber-toothed cats. Um, I attended the what's it called? The LA Tar Pits as a kid. Like I went to that museum a bit too, and they had saber-toothed cats skeletons and things. And it's a very big impression these things make on kids. And sort of one of my interests in this brand company, whatever, is that adults can sort of be reconnected with that sense of wonder in terms of science, which is so easy to impress on children who don't know anything about the world. And, they're being exposed to all of these different topics for the first time, which is super exciting. Adults are sort of more closed off from those things because I think we have a habit of tending to think either we know everything or we're not super interested in the world around us to the same extent as children are, who are, really impressionable. So I want to appeal to everyone in terms of there are a lot of things about the world that we don't know about, and it would be really great to know more about them. Um, Really simple things about the world around us. Anyways, I talked a little bit in the last video about Muybridge, and I think I have a whole video on him already on the website, or on the YouTube channel. But anyways, speaking of the everyday, it's amazing that I could do some drawings of flowers and then also say, there's a lot about science that we don't know. I can look at these flowers and I can ask you, like, do you know why flowers exist? Do you know why leaves exist? Do you know why plants create flowers in the first place? And your answer might be, you know, flowers are for pollination and leaves are for respiration. And, that opens 100,000 new questions about how plants work and why plants evolved in certain ways, um, where animals evolved in other ways. And I really want every single image that I create to be a jumping off point. For other forms of inquiry and thinking deeper about the world around you. It's nice to have a beautiful object like a mug, and to just be happy with it. But it's another thing entirely to think, I don't know the difference between an invasive and a native species. And personally, I am of the opinion that all species are invasive to an extent, maybe not in terms of damage, but in terms of the fact that, Earth billion years ago was a hot rock, or however many billions of years ago. And I'm gonna interview a conservation ecologist soon, and I'm sure he will prove me wrong. But it's interesting to have these discussions and thoughts. And, I might walk past a morning glory and not think about it, or I might look at it and say, wow, it's really beautiful. I also really want to know about it, where it came from, why it is the way it is, why is it this color, what animals are um, is that color appealing to? Are different pollinators interested in other colors? Oh, what about white flowers? Are white flowers interesting? Maybe I learn a little bit about the fact that some white flowers look white to us, but they have UV stripes on them that are not visible to the human eye without goggles. And maybe those stripes are really appealing and interesting to pollinators that can see in the UV spectrum. So there's a lot there that I want to explore too. I'm not saying white morning glories are like that. I think they're also called moonflowers. But some white flowers are like that, which is super interesting. Okay, so next we have tomatoes. Again, on the face of it, cool retro looking tomato poster. Doesn't have much to do with science. When I was a kid, I took a food science class in middle school over the summer, and it was super interesting. And I took it because I tested out of some other class, and so I randomly had to pick a class on a whim. And in that class, we watched an Alton Brown clip about pretzels, and it stuck with me my entire life. And I was like, wow, there is a ton about food and history and science that are all connected. And I read recently the first part of a book that was about, like, I think it was called The 10 Tomatoes That Changed the World, and the history of tomatoes and how, the Americas are where tomatoes are from, and they got introduced to Italy. And now we think that, Italian cuisine is so tomato forward. Like, what did they do before they had tomatoes? What did they do before they had pasta introduced? So all these different things. That's more history than science. In terms of science, there's a lot of really interesting stuff about tomatoes in terms of their acidity, about, um, you know, does their acidity fight off germs to the extent that, like, um, pasta sauce is safer from germs than some other things that might be in a refrigerator. That is not a medical claim. Do not sue me. But different things like that, where the unique chemical structure of a tomato lends itself to different, like, sauces and things and different preservation techniques and whatnot. Um, Similarly, on the flip side, tomato genetics are super interesting. I really want to look into sort of heirloom foods and what it means to be an heirloom food. There's a lot of research about, like, heirloom corn in the United States and different seeds being preserved, and how heirloom foods are different from, like, mass-produced foods um, in general. There's like a whole can of worms to open in terms of that. So super interesting. Um, Now I begin the next four things that I didn't talk about in the last video, so I'll try to be fast. It's very hard for me to be fast in these videos because each thing is connected to, like, a million other things. Um, but this poster is about crocodilians, which is a group that includes alligators, crocodiles, and caimans. And there's nine, I think, genera and like 25 or six species. But these are the nine, which are super interesting and different, and they live in different places around the world. And again, it's like the Big Cats poster where it's like, this is something really cool. This poster was inspired by this Legoland, like, stuffed animal, alligator, crocodile I had as a kid that terrified me. A lot of these things have to do with, like, things that terrified me as a child but are really interesting and are really memorable. And my approach to science and art and design is to be exciting and not terrifying. So sorry if these posters scared children. But yeah, this is like what I'm interested in. The reason one of these is white is that some alligators, crocodiles, whatever, are albino. I want to talk a little bit in the future about the difference between albino and leucistic animals. And one of the first indicators is whether the eyes are red or blue. Um, in those animals, um, wildlife, animals, humans, etc. There's, like, a lot to discuss that's super interesting to bring awareness about. So, one of the reasons that I had an albino alligator in here is for design purposes, but also uh, as an homage to Claude, who's an albino alligator in San Francisco, who's like a year, I want to say either a year or a month older than me, something like that. This is not a drawing of him. I didn't use him as a reference photo or anything, but again, one of the ways that I've had an entry into science is through sort of emotional connections. So, like, thinking about individual animals that I've seen in my life and connecting with them. But again, no connection in terms of the work with that animal, in terms of, like, legally. Anyways, um, these are animals that I love, that I'm super interested in, that I think are really cool. Again, I think one of the ways that people have been introduced to wildlife in the past has been through things like Steve Irwin, the Pratt brothers, different wildlife biologists, conservation ecologists, zoologists in the past. And so being able to bring that kind of work to the public through pop science or pop art or whatever is really, really important because it gets you excited, whether your entry point is being a child exposed to these things for the first time or being an adult. It's cool. Like it's cool to like science. It's cool to learn about these things. It's cool to be connected to the world around you. Um, More than just liking a video on social media. So that's sort of the work that I want to do is to have people spend 5 to 10 minutes out of their day being like, I don't know anything about how crocodiles and alligators are different. I'm gonna learn about that and their different snout shapes and their different habitats and XYZ. So that's my role in the world, is that kind of educator. The next poster that I made is about Catalina. Catalina is an island sort of off LA. I was lucky enough in high school to be on like a field trip to Catalina where we stayed overnight and like took photos of animals and plants and things and had to do a bunch of different projects, and it was very overwhelming. Um, but Catalina, one of the things that it has is it has a kelp forest, and it has coral, and it has Garibaldi, which is, I think, the California state fish because it's illegal to touch them. They're legally protected, these orange ones. This is another fish called the blacksmith fish because they have little black speckles that look like they're blacksmiths. This is a lobster. This is a sea lion. And basically, there's a million kinds of animals that maybe not a million, I don't know, that are in the Pacific off the coast of LA, but I didn't draw all of them. I drew a subsection that I really wanted to focus on. And basically in the accompanying zine, I'm going to talk about, like, isn't it interesting that coral is like an animal? How is it an animal? It seems like a plant. It seems like a rock. It seems like all these other things. And talking about sort of when we study biology, often it feels like we put things in buckets. Same thing when we study science, like we have clear-cut sections for things, and then the more you study, the more you realize, oh, those definitions are a little fuzzier and have more to learn, and all of these other things. So this is a rant to say, obviously, there's more than 6 or 7 different species in the Catalina kelp forest, but this is why I wanted to focus on. This is the image that I made. And that's going to be a recurring theme of my work, which is that, you know, yes, maybe there's 9 genera of crocodilians, but I didn't get to include all the different species and diversity. This is just the surface. So keep that in mind. Next things next is pixels. I'm also really interested in physics and optics and light and color. Actually, arguably, color is the only important thing to me in terms of work, in terms of art, and that's like there's like a huge debate in like the history of art on whether line or a color is more important, and that goes back like hundreds, if not thousands of years. So maybe me saying color is the only important thing to me is wrong, but in terms of my personal work, color very much is at the forefront, even though I do a lot of drawings that are very um specific in terms of the line weight. And I can do another video on like my art style because obviously that's influencing all of the images that I'm creating. But I think that's for another time. So, but color is really important to me, like the history of color and pigments and paint and pixels and how those things are different is sort of what I want to showcase in this group of images. So we have RGB versus CMYK. How are those things different? I spent a lot of time working as a letterpress printer in terms of my like foray into being a designer. It started as a very tactile thing. Like my background is as a watercolor and oil and acrylic painter and working with oil pastels and crayons and things like that and colored pencils and markers. So like all this physical media that was based on pigments and dyes. And then I come into the world of graphic design and it's all digital. And so how is a pixel different from a splotch of paint? And how do those colors that get reflected or bounced or radiated, how do those interact with your eyeballs? And like, why can't we come up with like a really solid cyan pigment? If our pigments are created out of minerals and Some of our pigments come from different animal dyes where like bugs are crushed up, which is cruel and sad. But cochineal is like a red pigment that's created from bugs, and is used to dye some foods. And, again, another can of worms to open up about color. Um, and I now is probably a good time to mention Victoria Finlay's work in terms of color and gemstones and fabric and all sorts of other things. And that's a book series I want to review. But anyways, um, color, pixels, science of optics is something I want to explore here. I didn't do a diagram of the eye because that's a little different, and I'm not ready to do that kind of biology stuff yet. I am going to try to interview a friend of mine who does medical diagrams, medical art, who studied both like med medicine and art, and is interested in plastic surgery, but is also interested in just like what the human form looks like. So stay tuned for that. Let's see if I can get her. I might not be able to. But last but not least is the work I did on herbs. I did this poster last night. My goal for last week was to do at least one poster a day, with the frog poster being designed by me in last September, so I achieved my goal. Um, but yeah, I wanted to do an herb poster. I wanted to have a good balance of plant stuff and animal stuff and abstract stuff. And part of that is because in terms of design, I think that looks best to have that balance, but part of it is because I do have these interests in different scientific fields. So anyways, this is some work I did on like 8 herbs that I know about. That shows how good of a cook I am. I know of these herbs. I have heard of them before. My cooking friends are mad at me in the distance, but basically I wanted to look at why these herbs are the way they are in terms of different shape of leaves, and there's an evolutionary story to be told on that, and there's a biological story to be told on that, and again, like a genetic story, like all of these different things to look at. Chemically, I really want to look at certain things like why cilantro tastes bad to some people, including me, which is a genetic thing. And, there's a lot of interesting questions about, um, you know, if poison dart frogs have neon skin to tell predators, don't eat me, I'm poisonous, and they have the poison in the first place because they don't want to get eaten. Isn't it interesting that different species, like plants, maybe want to be eaten, maybe are tasty to certain animals? And I'm not saying that's the case for herbs, but I'm saying it's the case for things like avocados, which developed during a time where there were mega sloths on Earth. This sounds insane, but they developed such that like the sloths were big enough to eat an avocado, and then the seed of the avocado was passed through their waste, and then moved it was a distance from the other tree, and so it could be planted somewhere else. And that's how, a static tree could have seeds in different areas. And so these different species have different tactics of living and procreating and passing on their genes, and they're really different from one another. And I don't want to sound too um like human. Like I don't want to ascribe like an intent to the plant such that it's, the basil is saying I'm going to be tasty to humans such that I can procreate. That's not really what I'm going for here. But it is interesting that different evolutionary and biological pressures have made it such that different species of plant, animal, fungi, whatever bacteria, have these different tactics. So it'll be interesting to explore why different plants taste differently and whether good tasting plants like have made use of that, et cetera, et cetera. And why I don't know if there's a reason other than the literal chemical reason that um cilantro tastes soapy to me. I don't know if there's a benefit where like if cilantro were technically poisonous, like only some people would benefit from having that receptor. Um there's like a lot there that I really want to explore, and haven't gotten to yet because again, I've only made these sort of informational zines for the first two. So anyways, that's that. That's a lot to take in, and I apologize for that very rambly. But that's all that I wanted to talk about for right now. And that's sort of maybe a good overview of how each topic I'm looking at is connected to so many different things. And I will be the first to admit that the work that I'm creating is not comprehensive either in terms of each individual topic being fully exhaustive of the information about it or having broad enough, enough topics to cover all of science and history and technology and art and all of these other things. So, that's not my goal. My goal is a starting off point, and maybe that's giving myself too much credit, and saving myself from the criticism of not being in depth enough about my research. But I never claimed to be an all-knowing scientist about all these fields, which is why hopefully I'm going to be interviewing a bunch of different scientists and artists and designers and people to help me make this interesting and educational. So I'm doing my best, and I hope I interest someone. And if I don't, that's fine. And if I do, that's great. So that's that, and stay tuned for more.